Hello and welcome back to another tier list. We move on from Lordran to Drang Lake, where I find myself getting a multitude of phone calls. What could they possibly be about? Well, it looks like the bosses of Dark Souls 2 are trying to become telemarketers. Will they be able to sell me their product? I find that a telemarketer should be based on these qualities: voice or tone, listening ability, adaptability, customer service, positivity, and of course, the product they're selling. And before we jump in, I'll have to note that I will once again not go over mini bosses. And with Dark Souls 2, I will also not be going over the twin dragon riders when I am already going over the singular dragon rider for obvious reasons. Same with the blue and red flame smelter demons. I mean, they're literally the same, except one has blue flames, one has red flames, and has a little more health and whatnot. Now, as always, let's hop right in and see who is a telemarketing talent and who is a phone call phony. So, welcome to the tier list. To kick things off, we of course have the Last Giant, where the Last Giant is the first boss encountered in Dark Souls 2 for most people. Now in his glory days, this behemoth was a giant lord who got his fanny whooped by us in the past, and is here to get his second helping. Now, in terms of marketing, I find that the Last Giant would have an excellent tone and voice, being a king long ago who had to command his faceless big boy troops. He's also extremely adaptable, as he literally tears his arm off just to try and secure a dub over us once he thinks he might lose the fight. Now, I do think the Last Giant would be lacking in the customer service department, as he was royalty and is now a prisoner, so he simply gets served and doesn't really serve others. His outlook on life and trying to sell his product would also be pretty bleak due to his recently weary lifestyle. But maybe he would be a good telemarketer, as that is almost the same as being a prisoner. With all that being said, I find that the Last Giant would sell a product that would increase vitality and height, obviously, with himself being the major spokesperson, but doesn't tell you the face-losing side effects of the product. Overall, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place the Last Giant into the B tier. He definitely has potential. I just don't think he has too much charisma to really seal the deal with me. So moving on from Giant to Floating Armor, we now have the Pursuer. Now, immediately, even the name to me spells out that the Pursuer is a go-getter. I think he would work day and night to try and seal the deal with me over whatever he is trying to sell. I do not know whether he has a good voice or not, but I do know that he is adaptable with his wide array of weapons he carries in his quiver. I don't know if he will attempt to sell me something because his motive is just to sell the product, or because it is selling the product to atone for its sins. I think because of that, the product that the Pursuer would sell, something that would be something that has to do with faith, of course, to atone for our hex building sins. With that being said, I think it would sell something to me a little better than that of the Last Giant. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to place the Pursuer a tier above and throw the Pursuer into the A tier. Now we move on to the horses that likes to beat up undead for days to years on end, the Executioner's Chariot. Once again, I'll note how persistent they are, since they just continue to beat up undead for as long as they are alive due to the old Iron King's will. But other than that, I don't really see much potential. It just wants to run me over, go around the arena, run me over again, go back around the arena, and so on and so forth. I don't think it would really try to sit in an overly large cubicle and really sell me anything. But if it did, I think it would be a product that would be like an installation on your average car wheels that make it a little more spiky and a little more quote-unquote thrilling to use. I mean, overall, I won't put the Executioner's Chariot all the way at the bottom, but I am going to put it into the E tier. I think it has the drive, but other than that, it would be a pretty bad telemarketer. So up next, we find Vendrick's Lieutenant, the Looking Glass Knight. So we know that the Looking Glass Knight was once used as a test for fellow warriors who wish to prove their worth to Vendrick. I think that means that he would use some reverse psychology tactics on the person who he is trying to sell the product to. He would initiate the call, make some bold claims about the product he sells, act like he realizes it's too good of a product to sell to some average person, such as the other person on the line, and pretend to withdraw and not want to sell, and boom, he is raking in the dough. The Looking Glass Knight has the looks, the charisma and charm, has the positive attitude since he continued to serve Ventric even after he went all hollow and green. I think that he would sell some all-surface cleaning product that leaves no residue behind, but also is tough and versatile like the warriors who he bested. I think the Looking Glass Knight has the capability to sell pretty much anything he comes across with his sweet techniques, even being able to use the shield to look into another dimension and maybe even see how he would look with the product he is selling. With all that being said, I'm going to place the Looking Glass Knight into the top and place it into the S tier. He is a telemarketing prodigy. We move on to the skeleton lords who were once tasked with undead hunts until they too became undead and eroded to the skeletal leaders you fight today. So a bit of a different selling tactic in comparison to the previous entrant. The skeleton lords I think would force onto you or even threaten you to buy their product or be met with quote unquote consequences due to their servants literally being the undead they used to hunt and are now their underlings. The skeleton lords don't seem to have too much when it comes to adaptability, nor too much when it comes to listening or having a positive attitude. Also, the army of undead the skeleton lords command would be ideal for telemarketing, as they would think their life is forfeit if they do not make the sale. But then HR shows up and makes them all leave and get away from their captors. I think for the product, the skeleton lords would sell something along the lines of anti-osteoporosis cream, or maybe some bone whitening bleach. With all that being said, I am going to go ahead, I'm going to place the skeleton lords all the way at the bottom into the F tier. I think they would get fired after hearing about how they threatened some poor soul to get their first sale, so they'd make one sale and then be done. So now we talk about the conjoined lizard thing, the Flexile Sentry. So in lore, the Flexile Sentry was tasked with taking all the undead who have nowhere to lay and rot to Lost Bastille by order of Ventric. Of course, the biggest thing to note is that there are two lizard folk attached to one another, so I think there are some possibilities that could come from that when it comes to telemarketing. One option is that they could take turns doing a somewhat good cop, bad cop routine, where one tells about how good the product is, while the other tells how bad other products from the competition are. Or they could be the salesperson manager, where the salesperson could put on the manager to get some sort of a once-in-a-lifetime deal. I think that the Flexile Sentry has some bad attitude, though, and just wants to clock out from the ship and just go home. The Flexile Sentry would sell products such as forearmed shirts, or perhaps something like a anti-flooding cork to put in the holes of a ship, since the arena we fight them in is literally flooding with water. But overall, I'm going to place the Flexile Sentry into the B tier. It could sell, but it doesn't particularly have a passion for it. So now we meet the pain lover herself, the Lost Sinner. Of note, she is the one who is punishing herself for whatever sins she thinks she has committed. You know, maybe someone could convince her that telemarketing is some sort of form of repentance, and she would be all over that if she's convinced, being more dedicated and providing the best service Drang Lake has ever seen. But otherwise, I find that given normal circumstances, she won't care for doing it in the slightest. She would have her cubicle as dark as can be, where she makes calls and then the person on the other line hangs up after she literally says nothing to them. I don't think the Lost Sinner shows any sort of commitment, nor any customer service, nor any positivity. Even her product would just be some sort of clothing or armor that causes pain to the wearer to repent. With all that being said, I will place the Lost Sinner one tier above the bottom and place her into the E tier, as you may be able to convince her telemarketing is repentance, even though it's pretty unlikely. Now we once again meet some gargoyles set to defend the bell tower of Belfry Luna. The Belfry gargoyles are, of course, tough, so they're capable of being at least to some degree persistent. The main positive is that you can hire up to 6 gargoyles from this boss fight, so you can have a full team of telemarketers from the singular hire. But the concern is whether hiring those 6 would actually lead to any sales. I find that the Belfry gargoyles could at least attempt to sell, but at a limited capacity, mainly due to their territorial nature, and their voices would obviously be questionable, especially for older folks who have a difficulty hearing. I find that the gargoyles would be the most enthusiastic selling something like actual real-life gargoyles, or maybe something like perch installations for the average home, so the gargoyles can like fly around and rest on them. Overall, the Belfry gargoyles are pretty mid-tier to me, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to place them in the mid-tier. I'm going to place them into the C tier. It's mainly due to being able to hire 6 of them, so you get 6 times the amount of outgoing calls. So now moving on from 6 combatants to 3, we now have the Ruined Sentinels. 3 souls that haunt suits of armor. The Ruined Sentinels seem to have one bad attitude towards just about anything, which in turn means a bad attitude towards clients. Now, their purpose is to stand and keep watch of people escaping their prison, so obviously they are management material, but we're ranking them based on how well they themselves can get the sale, not as a management role. They seem pretty poor in that regard, as I think they would have the sort of, I'm a ghost so you can hear like the last 2 words of my sentence and that's it mentality. I think the product they would sell would be something like maybe a hallucinogenic that makes your soul leave your body. Now overall, the Ruined Sentinels seem pretty bad to be a telemarketer, and therefore I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place them into the E tier. Maybe the 3 could at least scrounge something up, maybe one could lead the others to sell. So now we meet the Royal Rat Vanguard, which is quite literally a collection of rats that serve under the Rat King. Now my mind, as should yours, should immediately go to, you guessed it, Ratatouille. I think these rats embrace what it truly means to have jolly cooperation. So with that being said, I think I would trust the rats more so than the Ruin Sentinels or Belfry Gargoyles to make a sale. Now their voices, which would obviously be high-pitched and hard for someone to understand, would be a concern. But I think that they could form a community, making plenty of sales through partnerships and the bonds they have. The main concern is that could the collection of them as a whole overcome the difficulties that they might have during the phone calls? And I think for the most part, yes, but they would still have their difficulties. The product the Royal Rat Vanguard would sell would be subscription magazines on how rats are great and loyal pets, or maybe even like a swimsuit catalog of the Rat King. Overall, I'm pretty confident in the Royal Rat Vanguard, and so I'm not going to put them all the way at the top, but I am going to put them into the A tier. I trust those rats pretty dang well to make some telemarketing sales. So moving on from a bunch of rats to a singular dog-rat hybrid, we meet the Royal Rat Authority, who serves as a test to meet the Rat King. Now, I know I just bragged on the Vanguard, but I don't see the same spark as with the Royal Rat Authority. Rats alone weak, rats together strong. The Royal Rat Authority is just one who can't make those phone calls well. It's too big, too clumsy, too enticed to use the same moveset as Sif, and therefore to me seems like a pretty poor candidate. Maybe it's just the scorn I have for fighting this thing and it taking the place of everyone's beloved Sif. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to place the Royal Rat Authority all the way at the bottom into the F tier. And of course, it could sell the same products as the Royal Rat Vanguard, just not near as well, or it couldn't sell it at all. So now we move on to the Scorpioness Notchka, a human-scorpion hybrid who has lost her sanity and become more aggressive over time, even messing up our boy Man-Scorpion Tark. Of course, one big outlying issue is that both her and Tark are unable to be communicated with unless the Ring of Whispers is used. So maybe there could be some sort of system where we rig that ring up to the phone and Notchka speaks into the ring, allowing the person on the other end to understand her threats and whatnot. Notchka seems aggressive, mean-spirited, and really not all there. But she has a good voice to sell stuff, and so she could definitely get someone to buy simply because of her voice. She also at least has some sort of persistence. Scorpioness Notchka would sell something like some sort of anti-venom cure-all and then go around and sting people so she can create a bigger demand. But overall, I think I'm going to place her into the D tier. I think she's okay to some extent, just don't get too close to her. So now we move on to the big dual-headed spider, the Duke's Dear Freya. Immediately note that she has an army of spiders that seemingly obeys her commands, and so that's a positive. We can get her to don the headset, and her underlings would do the same. I don't think the voice of her or her spiders would be great though, nor would they really care to elaborate on the potential customers' concerns as to why they just hear hissing and such on the other line. The Duke's Dear Freya does literally think out her butt, and so that makes her think on the fly, and therefore she's quite adaptable. Her product would be a book on how to infatuate local dukes, so much so that they're driven mad because of it. Personally, I think that she isn't great, but isn't just awful either. So with all that being said, I'm going to follow up, and I'm going to place the Duke's Dear Freya also into the D tier. Now we meet the Queen of Beauty, Mytha, the Baneful Queen. Her obsession with beauty would make her an excellent candidate, as she is one of the most persistent bosses in Dark Souls 2 due to this. I find that she also has the potential to work harder than most, as she can let her body go on break while her head remains on the line to sell her products. Mytha also has a lovely voice too. She even made her area a factory for pumping poison into her chamber, so she can easily figure out how to increase productivity in her workplace. Instantly, we know her product that she would devote herself to would be some outworldly beauty product. Something bold like claiming that a 70-year-old can look 20 once again if they just put these snake scales on and drink this poison. I think that Mytha the Baneful Queen deserves high honors of being placed all the way at the top into the S tier. I think she just has a ton of upside in making her a telemarketer. From Mytha, we move on to the amalgamation of bodies and souls and whatnot down in the Black Gulch, aka the Rotten. Now, we immediately know that the Rotten is one who has the looks and appeal going for him. I mean, just look at those voluptuous curves he has. But for real, the Rotten is going to be pretty hard to justify in any regard to sell just about anything. I don't think he's capable of doing much in terms of customer service. I mean, look at his intro where he fails to put a head of a statue on and then immediately rages and attacks the bearer of the curse. Now, that is a huge red flag. We never want to get mad at potential customers, okay, Rotten? I find that the product the Rotten would sell would be something pretty unappealing, such as a carcass-scented poopery or something. Where are we going to place the Rotten? This one's pretty obvious due to the general unappealing nature of him. The Rotten is going to go all the way into the bottom and go into the F tier. We move on to the rehashed, maybe Ornstein boss, the old Dragon Slayer. Now, there are theories and speculations as to what the old Dragon Slayer really is, and if he is Ornstein or not. And as far as I know, there's no confirmation on if he is or isn't. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. With all that being said, I assume some general statements to be true on whether he is or isn't Ornstein. I mean, he's still a knight and therefore has at least a seance of keeping up with codes and honor. So we can then assume he can use that to make promises of up to 20% off the product to customers if they act now, and he will keep his word about these insane discounts. I find that the old Dragon Slayer is quite versatile in his selling tactics, using a variety of honorable methods to seal the sale and make a little commish. Would he have a decent voice that he soothes those who listen to it? I'm gonna assume so. Would he have the positive mindset to keep going even after failing to secure the bag 20 times in a row? I mean, he's a knight, so of course he will. As for the product he would sell, I think the old Dragon Slayer would sell something like How to Slay Your Dragon in 20 Easy Steps, where he's the one doing the instructions as well as telemarketing the video itself. Will he make it all the way to the top? Due to a little bit of uncertainty, I'm going to keep the old Dragon Slayer out of the S tier, but I am going to place him into the A tier. I just think he has to earn his way to the top, which he might do fairly easily. From Cool Armor Knight to Big Smelly Demon, we meet the Covetous Demon, one of my all-time least favorite bosses in the franchise. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you, Beta Chaos. He's literally a demon that is rejected by Mytha and in turn decided to eat excessively to show his passion for her, and in turn became the Jabba the Hutt with shark teeth that you see before you. Literally lazy and would eat all the conference room donuts I bring in one morning. He would be despised for all of those who are forced to interact with him. I find that his voice would be the same as a stereotypical Discord moderator, and he would probably harass people in the same manner as a Discord moderator. His product would be something that allows the expansion of the stomach and therefore can allow more food to be digested at once, which is disgusting. Pretty easy assumption where the Covetous Demon is going to go, and it obviously is. Let's go to the F tier and let's move on from this doo-doo boss. Now you get to choose your favorite color between blue or red, and yes, it is in fact the Smelter Demon. We know that this demon was given life from the old Iron King, who was then quickly defeated from said demon. Once again, we have the same issue of aggression as seen there, and that's a big no-no. At least the Smelter Demon is a bit more driven in comparison to that of the Covetous Demon, so that's something. The Smelter Demon literally has a fiery soul too, so much so that I'm scared to put him anywhere near an area that isn't fireproofed. With his non-meltable phone in hand, I think the Smelter Demon would make very minimal sales, but maybe it could at least sell something. For the products, maybe it could sell a wintertime service to clear the snow off of people's driveways, or be a furnace and open fire for the wintertime. So I do find the Smelter Demon to be a tiny bit better than that of the Covetous Demon, so I'm going to place it a tier above, and I'm going to put the Smelter Demon into the E tier. We move on from the created to the creator, where we now have the old Iron King. A once prosperous king with the Iron Kingdom that sunk into the fortress. I find that his egotistical status and love for his own wealth could be either good or pretty bad for telemarketing. On the positive side, as long as I provide a good commission, I think the old Iron King would be more than willing to earn his keep, and then some by selling whatever the new product is. But on the negative side, his own pride could harm his job potential, as he would think the occupation is way beneath him, which it's not. The old Iron King could go either way with this, and so of course I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and let him sit on his approved 50-ton load-bearing chair and don that headset and make some calls. The old Iron King would excel in selling products that are, of course, made of iron, such as a luxury cast iron set of pots and pans that could be used at any stovetop or open fire. With that being said, I still have some concerns about the old Iron King and his telemarketing career, and therefore I'm going to place him in the middle, and I'm going to place him into the C tier. So perhaps one of the more simple Dark Souls 2 creatures in terms of lore, we now have the Guardian Dragon, the poor fella cooped up in the world's biggest bird cage. The Guardian Dragon is literally that, a dragon that is just a guardian to the next area. The Guardian Dragon has the drive, but not really much else. In all honesty, I would trust the Guardian Dragon over that of the Smelter Demon, as the dragon at least has some sort of neutral outlook on life and just does what it is told without much insubordination. I find that loyalty to be commendable. The Guardian Dragon will sell products to alleviate boredom, such as a monthly jigsaw puzzle subscription, or an Xbox Live subscription or something, I don't know. whatever subscription you want. With all that being said, I will place the Guardian Dragon into the D tier, once again being a better candidate in my eyes, at least more so than the Smelter Demon. So now we go to that human frog thingy that is disgusting in just about every way, the Demon of Song. I find that the Demon of Song is one of the top candidates though, for a couple of reasons. I mean, first off, it lures humans into its lair with its overwhelmingly beautiful voice. So of course it knows how to bait potential customers with amazing offers and deals that would have the person on the line looking for their credit card as fast as they can. Secondly, we know its lust for flesh caused it to morph and adapt into luring people in the first place. That just screams adaptability to me, as I know that it had to adapt to satiate its hunger for flesh. I think for those two feats, we know that we can trust the Demon of Song to sell as long as we're far away, and we can rake in some serious dough. I find that the product they would be best suited to sell would be something like a songbook to lure in anyone and everyone, obviously. So with all that being said, I feel confident enough to put the Demon of Song all the way at the top into the S tier. I mean, it's going to be a phone call. You're not going to look at the other side, you're just going to hear them. So now we meet the loyalist being in all of Drangleic, Velstadt, the Royal Aegis. We know that he is Ventric's right-hand man and such a homie. He stays the entire time with Ventric, even after Ventric went hollow and green. I really admire the dedication to beat up the bearer of the curse, even though he knows Ventric isn't all there on the other side anymore. Now for telemarketing, I think that dedication and personal touch that Velstadt has could be used to have top-notch customer service. Would he leave the king's side to sell? Maybe if we can either convince Ventric to command him to, or just imitate Ventric by becoming green and telling him to. I think that Velstadt would sell a product such as a 6-part series on how to stay loyal with your loved ones. Overall, I feel confident in following up the Demon of Song and also placing Velstadt, the Royal Aegis, at the tip top of the tier list and putting him all the way into the S tier. From right-hand man to the king himself, we now have Ventric, a hollowed king who just roams his arena until we do enough damage, and then it's on like Donkey Kong. Now Ventric is one who didn't relight the first flame like Gwyn, and instead attempted to break the curse of the undead and failed to do so. He removed all who had the dark sign and sent them off far away, and went to the undead crypt and became hollow over time. Now of course this is a major concern for the telemarketing team we have, as Ventric obviously has some major faults. So first and foremost, he is hollow, so that means his mind is just gone. And secondly, he was not necessarily known as a kind king to like regular old humans, or giants for that matter. So that's another negative. And thirdly, he is royalty, so I do not see him having a great motive for wanting or needing any additional funds from the commission he would get for sales. A Highness would have a kingly product to sell, such as his autographed novel, obviously, which of course wasn't the official product he was supposed to sell in the first place. It's just his side gig for attention. Although Ventric is and was a king, I find that he would be not too vested in the telemarketing business, and so I'm gonna have to place him all the way at the bottom and give him the F tier. So now we have one of the most mysterious bosses in terms of lore, the Dark Lurker. So I'm gonna go and just go off mainly appearance for this rating. Now, 2 folded arms as well as an additional 2 arms means more number dialing and more calls. And I mean, it has 2 ears, right? So that's a plus. Its mystery means that it may not be good and it may not be bad. I'm just not too sure. The product that the Dark Lurker would sell would be just like cowls that manage to hide a person's entire face until it is used for robberies and such, so much that it would have to be discontinued. So I'm just going to place the Dark Lurker into the B tier. Because of 4 entire whole arms. That's just crazy and wild, like, come on now. So now we move on to the dragon riding, but is dragonless dragon rider. I mean, we know that the dragon riders have undergone fierce training to mount wyverns, so that means they're disciplined, which means more calls and less water cooler chats. Dragon riders are fierce, they're loyal, and they're pretty capable. Now, an issue I have with the dragon rider, at least the one that we fight, it appears to have lost his wyvern or something. I mean, why do we fight an arena where I can knock him off and just win automatically? So our particular Dragon Rider is a little bit of a klutz or something, which in turn means he could lose those sales records and lose some of his commission due to this. Come on, that was his own fault anyways. Products, of course, would be something along wyvern care, such as those green toothbrush dog treats, but they're instead huge and for big dragons instead. Overall, I find that the Dragon Rider is pretty good, but not perfect because of his clumsiness and losing a wyvern. And so I'm not going to put him all the way at the top, I am going to put him into the A tier. If it had a wyvern, it honestly had a pretty good shot at going all the way to the top to the S tier. So now we move on to a joke of a boss, the Prowling Magus and Congregation, where we have the Magus and the Hollowed Congregation that just bends to its will. Now, of course, the more bodies, the more calls, but would a hollowed congregation make phone calls if it is the will of the Magus? I mean, I think so, but the Magus can keep it on a case-by-case basis enough where the congregation can answer each individual question accurately, so that's a bit of a downside. Maybe the Magus could do kind of a robocall setup where the congregation is just scripted, but in turn, that means that potential customers would think it is a scam and the sales would just plummet. The product would be some weird cultish religious artifacts for some unknown religion, obviously. But I don't think the Prowling Magus and congregation would be particularly good at sales, and therefore I'm gonna place them into the D tier. At least something could happen, but it would be a pretty far-fetched case. So now let's go back in time, where a once prisoned last giant is now a giant lord. The key difference is that the giant lord is not degraded and worn over a long duration of being imprisoned, and so he has a sound mind and sound body. You could literally take all I said about the last giant and apply it here, but add those upgrades as well. A concern though is that the giant lord does probably have a disdain towards the general human populace. That may cause some of his positivity to be a bit lower. He could literally sell the exact same product as the last giant too. So with all that being said, I'm going to place the giant lord a tier above the last giant, and I'm going to place it into the A tier, keeping it out of the S tier due to its big question of whether the positive attitude is really there. So now we meet the dragon atop the dragon shrine, the ancient dragon. Telepathic abilities, boom, we can set up shop anywhere. It can have the worst cell phone service, and this big dragon would know exactly what the person on the line is saying and can speak clear and concise thoughts without even opening its mouth. It gives the bearer of the curse the Ashen Mist Heart, which shows its generosity and compassion towards others, even though we stab it in the back and try and fight it. I think that the Ancient Dragon has enough experience too, watching over everything to know the deepest desires of people, which is of course some loungewear that is approved by one giant dragon. Overall, the Ancient Dragon seems to be another top tier candidate, and so I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna place it all the way at the top and place it into the S tier. Up next is the beginning of the final boss fight compilation, where we now have the Throne Watcher and Throne Defender. Now, this simple duo just wants someone to claim the Throne of Want that is powerful enough to reignite the first flame. And now they are, like some bosses before, dedicated enough to literally stand and wait for what they want. So that means they have the drive necessary to want that commish. Now, they probably have some pretty dang corrupt souls, which in turn means that there may be some scandalous and greedy deals struck, which, hey, I'm not going to say it's just a horrible ideology for telemarketing. The Throne Watcher and Throne Defender are pretty capable, but not to the extent as much as some previous entrants. Their product could be something like just blinkless eye drops so they can never take their eyes off the Throne of Want. I think I'm going to place them into the B tier. They have a bit more upscale than downscale, but they still have a few issues. So now we have the manipulative queen, Nasandra. She's a reincarnation of Manus from Dark Souls 1, which is a telltale sign that she obviously has a heart of gold and butterflies and ponies and whatnot. She wanted the Throne of Want for herself and therefore wants to beat up the bearer of the curse, and that means she knows how to beat the competition. Get her a phone, get her a product line, and get her 8 hours, and she will decimate other telemarketers and leave them in the dust. Cassandra even led Ventric on for such a long time before he wised up, so she has that cutthroat mentality. She has the looks, the voice, everything we need. Cassandra would sell literally anything if it meant she got closer to her goal. So, of course, she's going to go ahead and make it all the way at the top into the S tier. She is a telemarketing prodigy. So up next, we have the final boss of the main game, Aldia, Scholar of the First Sin. Ventric's older brother, who became a monstrosity of bonfires or whatnot. Aldia seems to be extremely vested in just discovering the secrets of life through the undead. Now, that's all his focus is, when instead he should be focused on getting the bag. Aldia would sell well, but his heart just doesn't seem to be in it, so I think he would sneak in books about the undead and whatnot and just read while the manager has their back turned. Aldia would most likely care only about selling that pertains to the mystery of the undead, like undead bathwater. So overall, I would place Aldia dead center on this tier list, as he would be pretty average at best at telemarketing. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to place him into the C tier. So now let's move on to the DLC bosses through Dark Souls 2. First up for the DLC bosses, we have Ilana the Squalid Queen, where she's similar to Nasandra, who is born from a fragment of Manus, father of the Abyss. She's a vengeful spirit, avenging her fallen city and the people she loved. So of course, she is more on the pure side than the wicked side, at least in my opinion. Ilana is of course goal-oriented, and therefore that's always a big plus. But is her heart in one of the most thrilling experiences out there, telemarketing? I'm not too sure about it. I find that Alana has the voice and positive attitude, but is lacking in listening and customer service. She just wants more souls to power up. Ilana would just sell something that's like skin cream, but not for skin, but instead for the tendons underneath the skin due to her lacking skin in the first place. Maybe something similar to like Icy Hot. Overall, I find her sister to be a quite bit more telemarketing able than Alana, and so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna place her into the B tier. So now we move on to another dragon, Sin the Slumbering Dragon. Now, Sin just wanted to take a big old nap, but was interrupted and destroyed a city with toxic gas because of it. Now, that just screams no to me. We can find another telemarketer. But at least Sin accompanies Alana, so there's some loyalty there. I find that Sin would just have a loose tie on him and would continually apologize to the manager for making no sales, and it would be like more of a pity thing than anything else. Sin would just sell some generic brand of Tums or Pepto-Bismol, and it would just sell horribly. But due to pity, I will place Sin the Slumbering Dragon one above the F tier and place him into the E tier. So now we have the Grave Robber, Varg, and Sarah, who have no particular lore of interest besides them being grave robbers. So of course that means they are after the bag. That's really it. They would all just sell some quality ground and casket breaking shovels and would do so favorably. I mean, there's nothing more about this really, so I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to place them into the E tier. They want the bags, so I mean, they get to stay out of the F tier. So now we have the Trader of Vendrick, the Fume Knight. Now the Fume Knight does have that cool armor set and is basically identical in personality to that of Velstodt, except he lost the 1v1 clutcher kick and in turn got kicked. So other than that, you really could just go look at Velstodt and then get a clue about what I would say. The Fume Knight is a bit more edgier though and isn't as well versed as Velstodt, so that does knock him down some tiers. As for the products sold, I find that the Fume Knight would sell something such as Sticko Shield. Make sure you don't lose your shield, since his shield can be found in the Forest of the Fallen Giants. As for the ranking, I just don't see the Fume Knight working as well or as productively as Velstodt. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to place him into the B tier. Moving on, we have the Iron King's right-hand man, Sir Alon. Of course, he is a knight bound by honor and code as he bows before the bearer of the curse and engages in combat. With that being said, Sir Alon is then another one who would offer deals and promotions and swear in his life that the potential customer he's talking to that those deals will be made. With that being said, he might just have the highest sales of any telemarketer and then just one day up and disappear, just as he did with the old Iron King. So that does make me question him a little bit. His products would be some high-end cutlery, you know, that stuff that is made of like Damascus steel and costs like 10 times the price of the ordinary kitchen knives. Overall, Sir Alon is not perfect as he really might just up and leave one day, but otherwise he's pretty good. So I'm going to place him not all the way at the top, but I'm going to place him into the A tier. We now move on to the once legendary ruler, the Burnt Ivory King. Now we can note a few of the positive aspects of the king. He was a compassionate ruler and went out of his way to fight first on behalf of his people. He took Alsana in and protected her, even though she was attempting to literally abuse his powers. He even sensed later on that he was being corrupted by chaos from below his kingdom and just up and left without a word to protect his people from his corruption. Now, I find that this is going to be pretty easy to know where to place him. As for the products for the Burnt Ivory King, how about an audiobook on how to be like an ultimate Chad? So overall, the Burnt Ivory King has everything required to sell. And of course, that means he gets to go to the tip top and be placed into the S tier. Moving on, we have the Burnt Ivory King's saber-toothed pet, Ava. All Ava really does is protect Alsana as is ordered to by the king. I mean, that's just about it. So of course, would a giant tiger be able to make some calls? Not particularly, but maybe the tiger yells and whatnot could be used as some sort of weird promotional audio that the person on the other line thinks like, dang, that sound made me feel a bit inspired. I should give them my credit card information. Ava would just sell something like industrial-sized catnip as their main product. Now, Ava isn't just purely awful in every regard, but I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to place it into the E tier. And last up on this list, we now go from one big cat to two big cats, Lud and Zolan. I mean, is there much to say about them in comparison to Ava? They had different tasks assigned from the Burnt Ivory King, but really, that's it. They can even have the same product. I mean, there really isn't much else to say. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to place them a tier above Ava, though, literally because 2 is better than 1. So they're going to make it into the D tier. And once again, we now know who and what has the telemarketing potential to make some sales throughout all of the Dark Souls 2 bosses. Now, if you agree or disagree, leave a comment down below though. And if you haven't already, of course, hit the subscribe button or like button or whatever. Come back next week where we discuss my favorite of the Dark Souls games, Dark Souls 3, and we answer another prominent question. And of course, until next time, adios.